They are saying empires fall with swords, however sometimes they rot from the mattress chamber. In the year 38 CE, at the very peak of Rome's energy, a young bride stepped into the marble halls of the Palatine Palace. Her name turned into Valeria Messalina, just 15 years antique, selected as wife to Emperor Claudius, a person more than twice her age, frail in body but heavy with imperial authority. To the Roman people, this union became a promise. A fertile empress of noble blood, a girl who might embody distinctive feature, undergo heirs, and stabilise a dynasty nevertheless haunted through the madness of Caligula. But beneath the garlands of her wedding ceremony day, a darker tale changed into already stirring, the one that would etch her call into records as Rome's maximum perverted empress. At the stark glance, Messalina regarded each inch the right consort. Historic chroniclers describe her as possessing the kind of splendour Rome cherished: pale pores and skin, golden hair, and the sensitive aristocratic functions that set her other than the commonplace girls of the city. She fulfilled her early duties flawlessly, bearing Claudius 2 children and appearing at kingdom rituals with grace and modesty. Within the rigid moral code of a Roman society, where women were divided into classes of matrona, the virtuous spouse, and meretrix, the prostitute, she turned into expected to personify chastity. But what if that very comparison between what Rome demanded of her and what she secretly craved became the engine of her downfall? Did that Messalina is stated to have slipped away from the palace at night time disguised as a prostitute, running within the brothel of the Subura district? Tacitus records that she competed with Rome's lowest courtesans, decided to show she may want to undergo more customers than any of them. Imagine the horror of a senator stumbling into such a den of vice simplest to understand the Empress herself, underneath the grease paint and reasonably priced perfumes. It wasn't desperation that drove her. It became thrill, revolt, and a compulsive need to weaponize her sexuality towards the very society that idolized her purity. But brothel escapades had been simplest the beginning. Within the palace, she transformed Claudius's court docket into a theatre of obscenity. Amid the feasts, couches draped in silk, golden platters stacked with roasted dormice, and figs dripping with honey, wine spilling from jewelled cups. Senators reclined in uneasy silence, while Messalina presided no longer as a dignified hostess, however, as a mistress of ceremonies, summoning gladiators clean from the area, captives from distant provinces, even noble sons and daughters to amuse her with humiliating video games. One whispered account claimed she as soon as arranged a contest among herself and Rome's most celebrated prostitute, Scylla, wagering that she could outsurvive the professional in sheer endurance. By means of sunrise, Scylla collapsed in exhaustion after servicing 25 men. Messalina endured, surpassing 30. Her victory greeted not with cheers, but with horrified silence. Why did she do it? Turned into it lust past measure or something chillier? A calculated manner to manipulate the empire's elite through shame. Her sufferers spanned each rank, generals coerced into submission, aristocratic ladies blackmailed into degrading acts, senators' sons dragged into her spectacles. Resistance was nearly not possible. Folks who refused her advances often met sudden ends, a tribune located floating within the Tiber, a noble stripped of workplace in a single day. The message became clear. Rome's empress did no longer tolerate denial. Even religion became no longer spared. She staged ceremonies in mockery of Venus and Bacchus, draping herself in priestly robes earlier than tearing them away, commanding members to enact obscene rituals within the name of the gods. To Rome, faith turned into the glue of empire, binding citizen to citizen, town to town. With the aid of corrupting it, she declared herself the simplest authentic deity within the palace, goddess now not of love, but of domination. Believe the emotional wreckage in Roman families. A senator's wife, humiliated in public, returning home in silence. A daughter torn from her father's villa, reappearing days later with eyes that no longer met his. Claudius himself, often portrayed as susceptible or naive, regarded both not able or unwilling to forestall her, changed into be ignorant of her excesses or complicit through silence. Historians nonetheless debate, but the reality stays. Messalina's call unfold via the empire now not as an image of fertility and dignity, however as a curse, and but the empire persisted its empress. Markets bustled, legions marched, chariots thundered in the Circus Maximus. The facade of Rome's greatness continued, whilst its ethical centre withered behind closed doors. Every whisper about Messalina chipped on the Senate's authority. Every scandal weakened religion inside the Emperor's household. Rome, once priding itself on subject and virtues, observed its highest girl transforming debauchery into imperial coverage. The Palatine ruins nevertheless stand nowadays. Their fresco dwindled, their columns cracked. However, below the dirt of centuries lingers her shadow, the woman bride who became the maximum feared courtesan of her age. Her tale asks a question that chills across time. What happens whilst the only selected to embody distinctive feature instead makes vice her crown? Power in Rome become never simply written in legal guidelines or carved in marble. It become whispered in bedrooms, bargained over at feasts, and inside the case of Messalina, weaponized through the frame of an empress. Because the years of her rule opened up, her appetites did not fade. They grew bolder, more calculated, and a long way extra risky. What commenced as secret midnight escapades soon evolved into equipment of corruption that entwined Rome's most powerful men and women in her web of humiliation. Tacitus, Suetonius, and Juvenal, every in his personal venomous manner, chronicled her descent. They describe how Messalina hooked up what should only be known as an imperial brothel, hidden in simple sight within a highly priced villa near the Campus Martius. This changed into no longer a den for not unusual lust. This became an operation crafted with ruthless intelligence. Aristocratic women coerced underneath danger of wreck had been forced to serve along her. Senators, generals, and merchants were invited in under fake pretenses, most effective to find themselves compromised in ways that ensured their silence. Every whispered phrase, every trembling mystery shared in the warmth of shame was recorded through her dependable attendants. Did you understand that in step with later bills, she used this intelligence to blackmail entire households, securing wealth, governorships, and obedience without elevating a single legion? The micro-scenes of her reign are chilling. Believe a younger noble female dragged from her father's atrium and compelled to play courtesan underneath Messalina's watchful gaze. Image senators stripped in their togas, compelled into degrading spectacles before opponents who would later take advantage of their humiliation. One soldier who escaped the villa defined the experience as worse than the battlefield, confessing, "Blood dries, disgrace never does." This became Messalina's genius. She had observed that sexual humiliation should destroy guys extra very well than the sword. Her cruelty went hand in hand with spectacle. By means of the early 40s CE, her gatherings had grown to be infamous. Cloaked as religious fairs to Venus or Bacchus, they commenced solemn in field growing to the gods, then descended into staged orgies, wherein Rome's ruling elegants observed themselves performing acts they would by no means dare confess. Messalina orchestrated it all like a conductor. Senators were paired with their enemies, generals compelled into gruesome contests, noble better halves unveiled before roaring crowds of the elite. Refusal turned into impossible, compliance become wreck. Each player walked away certain now not by using loyalty, however through shared, suffocating disgrace. But possibly the most stressful account focused no longer on Messalina's public spectacles, however her obsession with competition. She dealt with intercourse as a gladiatorial recreation. Her maximum infamous contest, the persistence fit in opposition to Scylla, Rome's most renowned prostitute, stunned the capital. Earlier than a pick target market of nobles, Care paced herself carefully, tending to 25 guys through the long night time earlier than exhaustion overwhelmed her. Messalina did not forestall. She pressed on, surpassing 30, refusing to yield till no more volunteers remained. Through sunrise she had gained, and with that victory shattered each phantasm of Roman dignity. The Empress of Rome, spouse of Claudius, had reduced herself to spectacle, reeing in degradation, now not as shame, but as triumph. Why? What drives a lady raised in privilege, loved for her splendour, and topped as Empress to embrace degradation as her last pride? Historians struggle to explain it. Some argue insatiable lust, others a thirst for power. Nevertheless, others see the trauma of being married so young to an older, awkward husband. But possibly the truth is less complicated and extra chilling. For Messalina, the assessment itself turned into intoxicating. The extra her public position demanded chastity. the more interesting it was to betray it. Her empire of lust had outcomes. The Senate, already weakened, observed itself paralysed by using blackmail. Governors appointed now not for ability, however for silence. Generals unswerving now not through honour but via fear of publicity. Rome's regulations twisted under her unseen hand. Foreign ambassadors whispered of unusual negotiations in which senators seemed subdued, distracted, almost broken. The empire's management became being slowly devoured via one female's obsession. But decadence breeds enemies. The soldiers, who had long tolerated imperial excess, began to mutter. Loyalty was strained when rumours spread that their comrades too had been summoned to Messalina's villa, stripped in their dignity before her visitors. For soldiers hardened through conflict, humiliation changed into worse than death. The barracks echoed with whispers, curses that once would have meant treason. Her paranoia grew, guards had been tightened, punishments grew harsher, the spectacles became crueler, as if doubling down on disgrace could smother rebellion. However, every act carved new cracks within the fragile facade of her empire of preference. Rome had survived fireplace, plague, and invasion. However may want to, it continued to exist an empress who dominated through degradation. The breaking factor came in 48 CE in an act so audacious, it nevertheless staggers historians. Even as Claudius became away in Ostia, Messalina staged a wedding. No longer a secret tryst or non-public oath, but a complete Roman marriage to her lover, the senator Gacilius. The rite blanketed priests, witnesses, contracts, every ritual Rome required to legitimize union. Through regulation, she became now married to Caius, even as nonetheless bearing the name of Empress and wife of Claudius. It became not scandal, it became open riot. She had stepped from shadows into daytime, her lust converted into treason. What drove her to such insanity? Did she in reality accept as true with Claudius would submit that the Senate would acquiesce, that Rome might receive 2 emperors? Or was it compulsion, her want to enhance till destruction became inevitable? Whatever the purpose, the act became deadly. Loyal freed guys rushed to tell Claudius. At the beginning he laughed, wondering at a wild rumour. However, as evidence hooked up, disbelief gave way to fury. The emperor mocked and cuckolded ultimately acted. Claudius back to Rome with squaddies at his back. Messalina was found in the gardens of the palace she once dominated like a goddess of vice. Ancient accounts describe her very last moments with icy vividness. She begged, pleaded, provided her children as hostages. Whilst no mercy came, she tried to take her own lifestyles, however faltered. A soldier drove the blade home. The empress who had enslaved Rome with disgrace died not in grandeur, but in panic and blood. Her punishment did not stop with dying. Claudius ordered her statues toppled, her name erased, her memory condemned to oblivion. Damnio memoriali. Yet Rome has in no way forgotten. The greater they attempted to bury her, the louder her legend grew. Stand inside the ruins of the Palatine today, and the silence is heavy. Travellers may additionally surprise at the mosaics, however the stones whisper of something darker. The brothel, the orgies, the blackmail, the forbidden marriage. Messalina's story endures not due to the fact Rome wanted it informed, but because it could not be silenced. And within the cease, her legacy is a warning carved across centuries. Empires do no longer collapse only from invasion, but from corruption that furs within their own partitions. She proved that lust will be as unfavourable as metal, that disgrace may want to bind men tighter than chains. History closes her bankruptcy with a truth as brutal as her existence. Rome's most dangerous weapon turned into now not the sword, however its empress,